Next, we have one of the most popular preferences, that is General. We have My Preferences and Company Preferences in General. Let's go ahead and start with Company Preferences. First, we have the time format. This allows you to show portions of an hour as either decimal or in minutes. If you select minutes, then 10 hours and 12 minutes will be displayed as 10 hours and 12 minutes, like this. If you select decimal instead of being displayed as 10 hours and 12 minutes, it would be displayed as 10.2 hours. The next option is always show years as 4 digits. In this case, for example, 1999 is the example that they give. This isn't a bad idea. A lot of people like to have all 4 of those digits displayed. Never update name information when saving transactions. In QuickBooks, when we make a change on a transaction and we go to save it, if it's on the name, typically it will come up and say, hey, you've changed the information on the name for the customer, the vendor, or the employee. Do you want to save that information? If you say yes, then it will save that information, and so the next time you bring it up, it'll have that new information in there. On the other hand, if you click on Never Update Name Information when saving transactions, it will never ask you that. Even if you've made a change on that name, it won't ask you to update it. Under My Preferences, there are several fun options. The first option is pressing Enter moves between fields. This is a nice one. What this allows you to do, it allows you to use the Enter key to go from one field to the next, in addition to using the Tab key. Most people like to have this one turned on, so you can, instead of having to press Tab every time you want to go from one place to the next, you can press Enter. Automatically open drop-down list when typing makes it so that when you start typing a name in, it'll bring the drop-down list so you can see the options down below that are available. A lot of people like to have that one turned on. Be recording a transaction. That means when you do record a transaction in QuickBooks, it will put a beep on there and you'll be able to hear that that is being recorded. Automatically place decimal point. That's for those of you that are used to using the 10-key calculator and you just want to have QuickBooks place that decimal point for you automatically in the cents position. Warn when editing a transaction. Again, it will put a beep on there and say, hey, you're making a change to this. Are you sure you want to make this change? Bring back all one-time messages. What this is warnings that come up. A lot of people like to have that one turned off so there's not quite so many messages that come up. Turn off pop-up messages for products and services. What this does is advertise the additional products that QuickBooks offers, and this turns those off so there won't be so many messages coming up on that. Show tooltips for clip text means that if you have something that's been truncated by QuickBooks, so it has those 3 dots on it, if you put your cursor on top of it, it will display the entire word in an additional little window, little text window. Warn when deleting a transaction or unused list item just means if you're taking something out, make sure that you want to delete that item. Automatically recall information. This is a very helpful feature and a lot of people really like this one. It says automatically remember account or transaction information. First, automatic recall last transaction for this name. What that means is if I write a check to Mountain Bell in June for $374 for telephone expense, when I go in to write a new check to Mountain Bell in July, if I just put in the name Mountain Bell, it will automatically bring up all the information from the last check. It'll fill in all that information for me, and all I have to do is change the dollar amount of that check. This is a nice feature. It brings up the correct current date, and it also brings up the correct new number if you have a check number in there. It doesn't bring up the last check number, but brings up all the rest of that information. And so it makes it really easy to write the same check to the same person because it brings up that past history. Another option that's available in version 2007 and later is pre-fill accounts for vendor based on past entries. What that means is you can enter a bill to a vendor And if you keep using that same account 3 times, that's what the number it takes. If you use that same account 3 times to that same vendor, then it'll automatically remember those accounts so that next time when you enter a bill to that vendor, it'll bring up those same accounts. This is a new feature in version 2007 and later. Default date to use for new transactions. Use today's date as default or use the last entered date as the default. Most people want to have use today's date as a default, but some people have turned on use the last entered date as a default. What happens if you go and enter a transaction and predate it, put it for a couple of days ago or something like that, the next transaction that comes up will by default have that old date on it. If you've selected use today's date as default date, every transaction will start out with today's date, and then you can change that, but the next transaction will come up with today's date again. And that today's date just comes from your system's date on your computer. Keep custom information when changing item in transactions. This just gives you some options of whether you want to have it ask you, always keep that information, or never keep that information when you change the items in a transaction.